Okay, so continuing from the last video, we just ended with that question of at what point is that developing fetus considered a person that's deserving of the full rights of personhood, um, which affect the issue of abortion. Um, the other issue that the beginning of personhood could affect out of the issues we're talking about is genetic engineering um, and also the stem cell research. If one is of the opinion that this developing fetus is a person from conception, then that means that altering its genes, altering anything about its genetic code, and then also using some of those cells from those fertilized eggs or those embryos for stem cell research would also or could also be immoral. Because if that is a person, then you were doing those things without the person's consent, or if you were putting that person in harm's way, in danger, then that is also wrong. Again, if it's from a Kantian point of view, then as soon as you consider that embryo a person or that fetus a person, then they deserve that full dignity and respect as a person, including um, then not doing the genetic manipulation or using the cells for research and then disposing of the rest of the embryo. If someone takes a utilitarian approach, then it's still something that has to be considered. The welfare of that fetus has to be taken into account when dealing with these various issues. Um, the other issue we're talking about is also the end of life. So, not just the beginning of life, but what is considered the end of life. It used to be that when somebody's heart stopped, they were considered dead. That is no longer the case because many people know CPR, and we have other ways we have defibrillators, we have other ways to revive somebody after their heart has stopped beating. The new definition now, there's actually not a completely agreed upon definition, even within the medical field. There's one of two opinions. One is that it is the irreversible cessation of circulatory and respiratory functions, meaning the heart and breathing or lungs have stopped working and it's irreversible. You can't get it to work again. Or all functions of the entire brain, including the brainstem, so completely brain dead would be the term. Now, there's a difference between these two, but also figuring out when someone is really dead um, is also really important to know for some ethical issues. I mean, it would seem like, well, someone's dead, they're dead, right? But what if someone is in a permanent vegetative state where they cannot interact with anybody? They cannot survive unless they cannot survive on their own without the use of artificial machines. Um, uh, if you were to take them off the machines, then they would not survive. Um, is that person still considered alive if they're being sort of kept alive artificially or functioning artificially? These are important issues because when it comes to the end of life, uh, we have to make sort of tough decisions, and it's important to know what where how much or how far are we willing to go to keep someone alive. Um, and a lot of that depends on when we define uh, death. Uh, some people would say, again, from a Kantian perspective, if someone is still alive according to one of these definitions, then you do what you can to keep them alive no matter what. From a utilitarian perspective, people would maybe weigh the cost and benefit, right? If this person is never really going to come out of a coma or they're going to be vegetative the rest of their life, is it worth all these resources when those resources could be spent maybe reviving somebody or helping someone who could then later on survive on their own? Um, and again, it depends on the definition of death. So if somebody's heart, lungs are not working and they're being kept alive artificially, someone may consider that person already dead. So they're not really considered a person anymore. But someone who considers The brain function definition would say, no, this person still is alive. And so the calculations or the considerations would be different when thinking about what to do at the end of life. So these are really complicated issues. There's not really agreed upon definition of when someone becomes a person, when someone deserves all those rights of personhood. There's also not an agreed upon definition of when somebody is dead. So this makes a lot of these issues that we've been talking about a little bit complicated. Okay, especially things like assisted suicide or euthanasia. If someone isn't able to communicate, and by one person's definition, the person is still alive, well, stopping the machines that would kill them. By another person's definition, they say, well, they're not really alive anyway, so let's stop the machines because it's a waste of money. So you can see why having these definitions are important and why it makes it really complicated. So eventually, we are going to have our ethics bowls presentations. I'll give more details about that this week, and it'll be some sort of online presentation by the various groups. But the two ethics bowls that we would have heard from, let's see, last week and today, Monday, were these of regarding the rights of a father in an abortion decision, and also what's sometimes called passive euthanasia or refusing medical treatment for children. So some families may um, refuse medical treatment for a child who is maybe terminally ill or suffering from a disease, and in refusing the treatment, it could lead to the death of the child. And so some of the ethical issues surrounding those two issues we'll discuss a little bit more. Okay. Um, thank you. And coming up in the next few days, I will upload stuff, assignments, and lectures um, related to the topic of personal freedom and law and legal theory.